Welcome to Audiobook 365 Stories.
The fight that happened last evening had been coming for a while. On one side was Mr. Harbison, strong and stubborn, and on the other side was Jimmy, full of energy and strength. Trouble was going to happen. It was really Jim's fault. He had gone crazy over Bella again and stopped being careful. He stared at her during dinner, followed her on the stairs and in the back halls, just to hear her voice when she told him to move out of her way. He called and sent her flowers and candy without feeling ashamed, and he put out a book of pictures from their honeymoon and kept it on the table in the library. The only thing he did about his relationship with me was to blame me for everything that went wrong and bring me his shirts to fix the buttons. The first time I heard about the trouble was from Dal. He stopped me in the hall after dinner that night, and he looked serious. "I don't think we can keep this going for long, Kit," he said. "With Jim following Bella all over the house and the old lady getting smarter every day, someone will find out soon. And there's more. Jim and Harbison had a fight today about you." "About me?" I said, surprised. "Oh, I guess I did something wrong again. Was Jim talking bad about me?" Dal looked around to make sure no one was listening. "It seems Bella was really mean to Jim today, and I think she's jealous of you, Kit. Jim followed her to the roof before dinner with a box of flowers, and she threw them off the roof. She said she didn't want his flowers. He could give them to you, and she didn't care about him." "Jim is weak," I said angrily. "What did he say?" "He said he only loved one woman, and that was Bella. He said he never really cared for you and never will, and that divorce isn't always a bad thing if it helps people find real happiness. But none of that would matter if Mr. Harbison wasn't in the tent, trying to sleep." Dal didn't know everything, but it seems that Jim and Mr. Harbison were not getting along well. Bella left the roof, and Jim and Mr. Harbison met at the tent door. Dal said that not much was said, but Jim, because of his promise to me, couldn't explain and just said that he was an old friend of Miss Knowles. Mr. Harbison then said that it wasn't his business, but that some things couldn't be explained by friendship, and he tried to walk past Jim. Jim got angry right away. He blocked the door and asked what Mr. Harbison meant. There were a few different stories about what Mr. Harbison said, but in the end, he didn't want to explain more and said that if a man ignored and treated his wife badly for someone else, in some places, people would cover him in tar and feathers. "Do you mean me?" Jim asked, very angry. "My comment was general," Mr. Harbison answered, "but if you want to take it personally." Dal arrived just then and saw them staring angrily at each other. Jim had his fists clenched, and Mr. Harbison was standing tall with his arms crossed. Dal took Jim by the arm and led him downstairs, mumbling, and for now, the fight was stopped. But Dal wasn't hopeful. "You can help a little, Kit," he said. "Try to look happier, flirt a little. You can do that easily. Spend some time with Max. It would be nice for him." But don't let Tom Harbison think you are sad because Jim doesn't care about you. He might throw Jim off the roof. I don't think Mr. Harbison cares about me at all, I said calmly. You don't think he's in love with me, do you, Dal? I asked, watching him out of the corner of my eye, but Dal just smiled. In love with you, he said. No, not at all. He thinks you're a married woman. He's just fighting for what's right. If I had as much care for doing the right thing as he does, I'd make money from it. Just then, Max came in and asked if we knew where Mr. Harbison was. I can't find him, he said. I've put the telephone together, but there are still pieces left over to make another one. Where do you think Harbison keeps the tools? I'm using a corkscrew and 2 knives. I didn't hear anything more about the trouble that night. Max went to Jim to talk about it, and Jim angrily said that only a fool would get between a man and his wife or wives. Max replied that a fool and his wives are soon separated, and then he left Jim. After that, Jim and Mr. Harbison were polite to each other, but not friendly. And all the smaller problems were forgotten because of a bigger one. Everyone was starving. They worked all evening, but the phone still didn't work and everyone was hungry. We were all very proud, but we were starting to feel weak. We sat around while Jim played music quietly and Aunt Selena went to bed. The weather had changed and it was snowing, but it was still better than sitting in the living room. I felt like I wanted to fight the storm or cry or both, so I sneaked out while Dal was reading a poem called "Give Me 3 grains of corn, Mother, put on someone's coat, a soft hat," I think it was Jim's, and went up to the roof. It was dark in the hallway on the 3rd floor, and I had to feel my way to the stairs. I walked up quietly and turned the doorknob to the roof. At first, it wouldn't open, and I could hear the wind howling outside. Finally, I got the door open a little and squeezed through. It wasn't completely dark outside, even though there was a storm. Some light from the street made it possible to see the shapes of the bushes moving in the wind and the chimneys and the tent. Then, a dark figure came out from behind the chimney and seemed to jump at me. I remember putting my hands out and trying to say something, but the person grabbed me roughly by the shoulders and pushed me hard against the door. From far away, I heard a deep voice saying, "So I've got you." Then everything went dark, and I felt like I was floating in the storm. Sleet hit my face, and the wind whispered over and over, "Open your eyes, for God's sake." I opened my eyes after a while and realized I was lying on the floor inside the tent. The lights were on, and I felt cold and wet with something dripping down my neck. I seemed to be alone, but then someone came into the tent. It was Mr. Harbison, and he was holding a bunch of half-melted snow in his hands. He looked worried and serious. I sat up quickly, which stopped him from throwing more snow on me. My neck felt strange and stiff, and I was very dizzy. When he saw I was awake, he dropped the snow and looked down at me. "Do you know," he said seriously, "I almost choked you a little while ago?" "That doesn't surprise me," I said. "Do I know something you want to keep secret, Mr. Harbison?" I felt very sick, but I didn't want him to see it. It's strange, isn't it? How we always go to the roof to have our little fights? He seemed to relax a bit when I joked. I didn't know it was you, he explained quickly. I was waiting for someone, and because of the hat and coat you wore, I thought you were them. That's all. Can you stand up? No, I answered, even though I could stand. I didn't like how he was talking to me. What happened next was surprising. He suddenly picked me up, and in a moment we were outside in the storm again. At the door, he reached for the doorknob. Turn it, he ordered. I can't reach it. I won't, I said angrily. Put me down. I can walk just fine. He paused. Then he slowly let me stand on my feet, but he didn't open the door right away. Are you afraid to let me carry you down the stairs after what happened on Tuesday night? He asked quietly. You still think I did that? At that moment, I wasn't as sure as before, but something made me say, yes. He didn't seem to hear me. He stood there, looking down at me as I leaned against the door. Good Lord, he groaned. To think that I almost killed you. And then he bent down and suddenly kissed me. The next moment, he opened the door and we went back inside. At the bottom of the stairs, he stopped, still holding my hand, and faced me in the dark. I'm not sorry, he said calmly. I suppose I should be, but I'm not. But I want you to know I wasn't guilty before. I didn't mean to now either. I'm almost as surprised as you are. I couldn't speak, but I pulled my hand away. He stepped back to let me go, and I walked down the hall alone.